welcome you all to the webinar today on lettuce variety trials and seed saving here in our area. We have some great speakers today, which I'll introduce a little later. First, I'd like to acknowledge where I'm calling in from and address some housekeeping issues and give you a brief introduction to lettuce production that was put together by my colleague Hugo Martorell. So my name is Rebecca Ivanoff, and I'm calling in from Guelph, Ontario. It's a gray, warm day today, but it's a great place to be calling in from. So Guelph, like every community, owes its existence and vitality to past generations who contribute their hopes and dreams and energy to making the history that led to this moment. My home is situated on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, particularly the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as to the Chinootan, who the Wendat called the Attawandarin, or the people of a slightly different language, and the French called the Neutral Nation. The history of land and the relationship between land and people is something I often think about when I have my hands in the soil. Today, I'm also thankful to the people and the crop ancestors that came together in the southeast of the Mediterranean in this co-evolutionary process that gave rise to lettuce, which we get to talk about today. So just some housekeeping announcements. A request is to please stay muted when you're not speaking. And if you do have headphones, they will give optimal quality when you do speak. Feel free at any time to use the message board or the chat function here, and feel free to ask questions during the presentations. If there's immediate questions for clarification, we'll ask them during presentations, but we'll also leave a dedicated question and answer period at the end of the 3 different presentations. I'd also like to acknowledge that we may have some Francophone speakers on the call, and though myself and I believe our speakers will be presenting in English. I mean, they will be presenting in English, but most of our slides do have some French translation, and the recorded video will also have French subtitles once it gets posted on the Bauta website. So today we have 3 speakers. Anne Slater is a market gardener near St. Mary's, Ontario, where she's been farming organically since the 70s on land that she grew up on. And she's been involved with the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario's farmer-led research program since it began, and is one of 10 farmers who are participating in 2 lettuce trials this year. We also have Adrienne Shelton, who is the Northeast Organic Product Specialist for Vitalis Organic Seeds. And when I met her was at High Mowing as a product development coordinator. We also have Leah Babitch, who is the co-general manager and seed garden manager at Turtle Tree Biodynamic Seeds in Copain, New York. They grow vegetables and herbs and flowers, as well as contract with other biodynamic growers. They work with people of diverse abilities and with volunteers from all over the world. I am very pleased to have these 3 speakers with us today. I'd like to just go through these few slides that I have here about lettuce production. Here in Canada. So just to clarify, we're going to be talking about lettuce today. So there's different market classes of lettuce, from iceberg to romaine to leaf lettuce and butterhead. But we're not going to be talking about other leafy greens that people sometimes put into this category. No chicory or arugula and things like this. Now, Seeds of Diversity Canada has a seed finder website where people can go in and search for different varieties. And just this graph is just showing some of the varieties that were the most searched for this spring. And in Quebec, they have a farmer listserv, as well as they've had some farmer gatherings where they've talked about some of their favorite and best performing lettuces for their area. And these are just some of the varieties that they have listed, the top varieties. And you can keep in mind, some of these things will come up again. Green Star, Tropicana, you'll hear about them again soon. Here are some others, just romaine, Batavia, butterhead. Now these slides will be available after the presentation, so feel free to go back and review them. In 2018, the Bauta Initiative did a survey of breeding needs across Canada with farmers. And this is what was said around lettuce. It was something that came up during the survey. Some of the priority traits that farmers were asking for were, temperature tolerance, whether that's in the summer or in the fall. So this is right on point for the variety trials that the farmer-led researchers are doing. Also, disease resistance was something that came up as something that was very important to farmers. And of course, flavor. Lettuce can be bitter, and so less bitterness was something that was asked for. So our first presentation is by Anne, and I'm going to switch over to another presentation. I will share. Are you all able to see that slide? Anne, are you able to see that as well?
I can see that.
Wonderful. So, Anne, feel free. I will just move the slides along, and if I'm going too slow, let me know.
Okay, so I assume you have another slide after this one. Oh, this is about the farmer-led research program. So yeah, so last year we did some trials, a group of us on fall lettuce varieties, and this year I think we have 10 farmers that did trials on summer lettuce varieties and fall lettuce varieties. So so this is from last year's fall lettuce varieties. So basically, I mean, so you know what we did, we each did two plantings in the fall, and we did the same with the summer. So 2 plantings, trying to hit, starting the seeds at a time that would hit the summer heat or whatever, and then and of course, what you usually have in the spring is it's good conditions for starting lettuce, and then they have to be able to deal with the summer heat. This year is actually I know that I ran into trouble with seeding at a time that was exceptionally hot, and that caused some issues. And then in the fall, of course, we're starting lettuce in less than optimal conditions as far as heat, but then trying to have it do well into the fall, into that cool, dark time of the fall. So we all tried to do 2 plantings, and then of course two transplantings, and oops, we're going through a little quick here. Can we go back to the first one? Just to get, and then within that, trying to plant at least 12 heads in 2 replicates, so 2 pieces, so you can see on the bottom corner there, you know, different kinds of lettuce, but you know, sort of 12 on one side, 12 on the other side, and mixing them up. So so in the fall lettuce trials last year, I think we've improved, sort of trying to have more consistency as far as what lettuce each of us are growing. And I know for me, I always want to know, okay, what was the top performers? I want to know what works. So you'll just see Magenta and Ruby Star were the top performers last year in the fall lettuce, and Adriana, which was one that some of us had good luck with in the past, was a bit of a disaster. So anyway, on to the next one. And this will just show the location of the participating farms in 2020. So we do go across the province, but most of us congregated down there in the Southwest. And I should say there was a couple of the trial people on the webinar today, so they'll be able to answer questions. Oh yeah, so here we've got the 2 replicates and the for this year, and these are the summer lettuce varieties we tried. So 2 green leaf lettuces, Green Star and Tropicana, 2 Batavians, 1 Magenta, 1 Nevada. Well, I guess 3 Batavians. Muir is listed as a Batavian too, and then we did the 1 red leaf lettuce, new red fire. So we're still compiling the results from this year. We've all been busy, and everybody hasn't even got their results in for the summer lettuce. I took a quick look through yesterday to see what was kind of looking as being a lot of people finding it working well, and I think Magenta and Nevada were kind of ones that people had generally good luck with, whereas oh, now we've got bean seeds. Whereas, oh yeah, here's an example of our data sheet. So whereas Green Star and Tropicana were ones that people were having a bit of challenges with, and I know that I found that they bolted rather quickly. So so we were trying to keep track of each replicate. I didn't do a good job of that at all, but keeping track of the number of fields and number of plants left in the field, and keeping in mind I planted 12 in each replicate when I could. The other thing that we kept track of, and I find it kind of important, is the germination rate that we had on each one, each planting. And I know I ran into some challenges with my first planting on the germination, because like I said, I had some issues with it being hot. But for me as a grower, the germination rate's pretty important. I want to know that that varieties germinate well too in less than ideal conditions. So oh yeah, so there's the overall germination rates. So obviously, so Tropicana with a bit of general challenges there, and Green Star again. So that's our summer lettuce. There'll be more information once we get everything compiled, and yeah. So I think we probably got some pictures here of the fall lettuce. So the fall lettuce varieties we grew were I'm never sure how to say that. Encino. A green oak leaf lettuce, and Grazion, which is another green leaf lettuce. Ruby Sky is a red leaf lettuce. we had red mist that came from two different sources. So it was nice to have 6 varieties, and it made sense when we could to try the red mist from 2 different sources. And then magenta, which was which we had in the summer as well. So it was nice to have that bit of crossover. And the magenta and the ruby sky were also ones that we trialed last year, which, as you recall, came out as top performers. So it's nice to, I find it really valuable to see how things grow in 2 different in 2 different years, because this fall was very different from last fall. So it's nice to see if there's any consistency. One of the things, of course, we're looking for in the fall is frost tolerance. And though we may not have liked it, it was rather nice to get an early hard frost, at least in some of our locations, because that gave us some good data. And the same, having a hot summer gave us some good data on what takes the heat and what that doesn't. So so here you can see a bit of a different layout on than I did. This isn't mine, but a bit of a different layout on how the varieties are spread out. So just 3 varieties growing there next to each other in a single row of each one. So so there are different ways depending on your own setup, how you can grow things. And obviously this is one that was having some frost covers there too. So if you don't know, that's the Encino on the left, the Grazion in the middle, and that's the ruby sky on the outside. And then up at the top, you can see the red mist and the magenta. So we got another slide, or nope, that's it. So just my own observations. I had really good luck with ruby sky last year, and to me, in my own conditions, it was the top performer in the fall this year on both plantings, and came through the hard frost, not being covered with no issues at all. So so that's just my little bit of observation, but I am waiting to see what everybody else found. That's the value of having several of us to see what happens among all of us. So I think there'll be time for questions later if you have any. And like I say, I know that at least Harold and John are on the webinar, and maybe some other of the lettuce variety trialers.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was wonderful. It's great to have your knowledge here as the pictures go by, and to I'm excited to see what the results are from these 10 farms. The farmer-led research program allows EFAO members to come together to answer something they're curious about on their farm, and to have 10 different farms be curious about this lettuce really shows how important this all is. So I'm going to pass it over to Adrienne. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Let me see if I can get this to work. There we go. Okay.
Perfect.
Does that work? Okay. And
that is working.
Okay, great. I'm not sure how to hide this. Well, thank you for the invitation to participate in this conversation. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to learn more about the variety trials that you all have been doing. And yeah, so it's a pleasure to participate. As Rebecca said, my name is Adrienne Shelton, and I work for Vitalis Organic Seeds. I'm based in Vermont, so a little bit of a hike from Ontario, but still pretty close to the Canada border at least. So, yeah, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Vitalis and what we do, and then focus most of my time talking about lettuce from sort of a larger perspective, and hopefully highlight why what you're doing with the variety trials is so critical to really finding the best varieties for your area. So Vitalis is part of Enzazaden. We're a Dutch breeding company. So Vitalis itself was founded in 1994, focusing exclusively on breeding and producing organic seeds for organic growers. We joined forces with Enzazaden, which is a conventional breeding company in the Netherlands, in around 2008 or 2009. And so now we're one company. Vitalis is the organic arm of Enza, and then Enza produces conventional seed. We're exclusively a vegetable and herb breeding company. We don't do anything else other than variety development and producing seeds. So some of our core activities, as I said, we breed new varieties, just focus on organic farming systems. We work in a number of different crops, from tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, lettuce, onions, leeks, herbs. Once we develop the varieties, we produce seed of that variety. We also work on organic seed treatments, especially in crops like tomato rootstock, prime seeds, and that sort of thing. And then we sell our varieties. We are a global company, so we're selling our seeds throughout the world, especially for our organic division. We have a strong presence in North America and US, Mexico, and Canada, and then also in Europe. And our distribution is through seed dealers. So we are not selling direct to growers, but a lot of the companies that you all are probably familiar with carry our varieties. So we sell seeds to High Mowing, we sell seeds to Johnny's, we sell seeds to William Dan in Ontario, and then they repackage and sell our seeds. So now to the point of our webinar here today, to focus on a little bit more on lettuce, I wanted to just sort of take a step back and sort of frame for you the lettuce market, certainly in North America, and again, to highlight why the trials that you're doing is so important. So as probably a lot of you are aware, lettuce, and especially focusing on organic lettuce, is quite a big market in the US anyway. I'm sorry that this is focused more on the US because that's where most of my numbers are coming from. But in general, organic lettuce is about a $400 million market in the US. And the vast majority of that lettuce is produced in California. So if you look at this pie graph here, these are the acres, the total acres where lettuce is grown in the US. It's almost 40,000 acres. And 84% of that acreage is in California. And if you look at this insert here, you can see that in the summertime, it's pretty much all produced here in the coastal region of California. This is Salinas and Monterey County. Then on what they call the shoulder season, spring and fall, it moves into the interior in the San Joaquin Valley. And then in the wintertime, production moves down here to the border with the California border with Arizona, Yuma. And so again, the vast majority of the lettuce is grown in California, and then you see 8% of our acreage is in Arizona, and that's in the wintertime. And the rest of the entire country, the USDA calculates is 8% of the total lettuce acreage. And so why that matters for us is that no one is breeding for our regions. No one is breeding for the Northeast. Certainly no one is breeding for Canada. So it can be challenging to find lettuce that performs well with our environment, which is of course very different than coastal California and Yuma, Arizona. So just a little bit more about some of the big differences that I see and what I see then with the performance of varieties out here on the other side of the continent is in California in the summer especially, it's really bred for a Mediterranean climate. So it never gets too hot. It never gets too cold. In the summer, there's zero rain. So all of the irrigation is, man-made, person-made irrigation. So they can essentially decide when the crop needs water and when it doesn't. For the most part, it's direct seeded, generally a much tighter spacing, in part because they don't have a lot of the, some of the humidity related disease pressures that we deal with out here. For the baby leaf and any high density planting, it's all machine harvested. For the most part, at this point, head lettuces are still harvested by hand, but even that is changing. So you have breeders focusing on head lettuce, for example, that has a really much taller frame so that it can be cut mechanically. As labor is becoming more and more of a challenge, some growers are moving to fully mechanized harvesting. The market outlets, I think, are also quite different in California. If you can imagine those, all that lettuce is going into all the grocery stores, throughout the US and Canada. So in addition to head lettuce, they're growing hearts, romaines, where they're stripping it and they're packaging hearts. They do what's called chop, which are they're chopping romaine so it's sort of a pre-made salad for both retail and food service. Then they're also they're taking leaf lettuce and they're separating the leaves, so they come in little clamshell that you can just take the leaf off and put it right on your burger or your ham sandwich or whatever you're eating. And then of course, salad mix is huge. So they're processing the lettuce in a number of different ways, much more widely than what I see growers doing in my region here in the Northeast. And then they have two main disease challenges that they're dealing with. One is red lettuce aphid, which is not a disease that we see on the East Coast. And then downy mildew, which of course we do have here on the East Coast, but not to the same extent that they do in California and Arizona. And so, these are different aspects that really drive the breeding of the majority of the lettuces that are on the market, and lead to the challenges that we have when we're trying to find varieties that are adapted to our unique markets, and as well have the performance that we need in our climate. So I guess I didn't say at the beginning what I do for Vitalis. I'm a product specialist, which means that I do trials essentially with all of our material coming out of our breeding programs. I do trials on organic farms throughout the Northeast. I generally have trials as far north as Quebec, and I do trials as far south as New Jersey generally, and then west into Western New York, and then east to Maine. And so I'm doing trials of all of our material on organic farms to try to figure out what of our material coming out of our various breeding programs is best adapted for organic production in the Northeast. And I have a colleague doing the same thing in the Pacific Northwest. She's based in Oregon, and then I have another colleague in California. And so together we sort of compare our results at the end of the season, try to figure out which varieties are more broadly adaptable and which varieties are really better slotted for particular regions. So lettuce is one of the crops that's really important for me to do trials on, because the results that I hear from my colleague based in the Salinas Valley in California often do not translate to what I see when I grow the crop out here. And so I've just listed some of the main things that I'm looking for, and some of them are really, you know, sort of very similar to what my colleague in California is looking for. Of course, the yield is really important. Uniformity of head, heart density is something that's really critical, and that I find is really challenging, especially with romaines and butterheads, often because of the heat that we experience in the summer. The heads grow too fast to be able to really fill in and have a nice dense heart. And so they tend to be really gappy. Even if they do, you know, they form a nice dense heart in California, I find often out here, they just grow too fast and they don't ever have any real density to them. Tip burn is another huge issue that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. Again, that's an issue of the lettuce grows so fast and it takes up so much calcium too quickly, and that causes that browning on the tips. That's a huge issue, especially for, I see it a lot in romaine in the summer. I'm always paying attention to how fast a variety will mature. I think generally the growers that I work with, the faster the better generally, because you can get the crop out of the ground before it starts to be susceptible to disease. But also you want something that has some field holding capacity, because if it gets to maturity really quick and then it bolts right away, of course, that's not helpful either. Bolting, again, of course, is another thing that I pay a lot of attention to, especially in the summer with the heat and the day length that we have. Regrowth, that's not as much relevant to the segments that you all were trialing this year, but certainly for the one cut types, a lot of growers I work with are hoping to get 2 and sometimes 3 cuts out of that. So seeing how well a variety will regrow. Bottom rot is a huge issue, which is caused by rhizoctonia. That's something that my colleague in California hardly ever has issues with, but it's something that I see a lot of in my trials. I'm always looking for flavor, a nice sort of crunchy texture to the leaf, and how thick it is. And then Astor's yellow is another problem that I encounter a fair amount of, which is spread by leaf hoppers and then causes sort of a misshapen yellowing plant. When you were showing and the trial data sheets that you all use, that looks very similar to the type of evaluations that I do, where I'm using a rating scale for a lot of the different traits to determine, you know, which is the best in the field. I do usually weigh the heads to get yield, and I often will measure the core to see how big the core is. But otherwise, it's a rating system very similar to yours. Yeah, and also I think one thing that I also think is really helpful when doing trials is also to keep notes, you know, because sometimes even when you go back to look at your results and you see, oh, this is a 5 or this was a 7 or whatever your rating scale is, but unless you like wrote some notes about, you know, what you particularly liked or didn't like, sometimes it can be hard to distinguish in the end what varieties sort of stood out. And then the last thing I just wanted to go over quickly, and something that I saw that you had noted initially with the different varieties, is if there is any intellectual property around them. And that's something that is something it's good to keep to be aware of, I would say, especially in a crop like lettuce, because compared to a lot of the other vegetable varieties, it is a crop that tends to have a fair amount of intellectual property attached to it, especially if the varieties are coming from large breeding companies such as Vitalis or Reichschwan. which is another real, they have a really strong lettuce breeding program. And the reason is really because lettuce is an open pollinated and a self-pollinating crop, you know, it's fairly easy to reproduce the seed, especially out west where they're not dealing with the humidity issues. But I think as Leah will talk about, you know, it's not that hard to even produce lettuce seed out here. And so essentially it's really easy to reproduce and to essentially steal a variety. And for a company like ours, where we put a lot of investment into the disease resistances, especially, it becomes a matter of really trying to protect the investments that we've made into that crop. And, you know, I think it's important to keep in mind that, again, you know, the vast majority of the lettuce market is in California, where you have growers who are growing hundreds or even thousands of acres of lettuce. And so you can imagine in that scenario, a grower would have to, would be able to not harvest a small portion of their acreage and have enough seed of a variety for years. So it's really with that model in mind, I think that utility patents and intellectual property are used just as a as a means for companies to be able to protect themselves. And the other thing just to point out is there's two main types of intellectual property in the US that are applied to something like lettuce. One is the Plant Variety Protection Act, which is often called PVPA. It's a intellectual property that's administered by the USDA. And what's really nice about the PVPA protection is that it protects the commercialization of a variety, but it allows farmers to save seed, and it also allows people to breed with those varieties. So these exemptions allow for further breeding and development. Utility patents are the other way that lettuce is often protected, and I would say nowadays, the vast majority of lettuce varieties, if they are protected, they're protected with a utility patent rather than a PVPA. And the utility patent is quite strong, meaning that you really are not, you're not legally allowed to save seed or to breed with that variety unless you contact the patent owner and get explicit permission to do so. So it's just something to keep in mind, and you know, it's something that we can talk more about during the question and answer period if folks have more questions, but I think that is all I have for now, and I can turn it back over to my fellow presenters.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. I was very impressed by how much overlap there was between what you were saying and what Anne had presented. And there was a lot in there that I didn't know, and yeah, I'm very grateful. I'm just checking the chat. There haven't been any questions put there yet, but I have a few, but maybe I'll hold off until we get to the question and answer period. So I'm going to share a screen for Leah now. That was a bit smoother there. So Leah, I'll pass it over to you, and try to keep on top of switching slides as you speak. Don't hesitate to let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow.
Thank you. So I can just introduce myself a little bit in Turtle Tree Seed. So my name is Leah Babitch, obviously, you know that. And Turtle Tree is, we're a very, very different company than Vitalis, I can tell you that. We are very tiny, for one thing. We grow and sell our own seed. For the most part, we have a few other growers who we work with, who are all biodynamic growers. And some of them are also dual certified as organic as well. as we are. We actually don't at the moment sell in Canada. Yes, we're so small that it's very difficult for us to do all of the paperwork involved. And so we don't do that at the moment, but we are hoping, we have in the past had someone selling for us in Quebec, and we hope in the future to be able to do that again. We're working with someone in Ontario now who might be able to sell our seeds in Canada. We are also part of what's called a Camp Hill community. So it's an intentional community that especially includes adults with developmental differences. And so this particular one, there are many communities all over the world. They were begun by refugees just before the Second World War, who were fleeing persecution in Europe and fled to Scotland and they felt a real connection. They felt that they were obviously refugees and they felt strangers in the land, but they also felt that people with developmental differences were in a similar boat from them, even though they were born, in Scotland or England or where they were, but that they were sort of outcasts and refugees from society. And so they built first a school, and then later on, when those children were older, a community where the people with developmental differences could become as independent as possible, but be accompanied so that they could have a full and rich life. And that's what we do here. And part of that is that we have a seed company, which is Turtle Tree Seed. And yes, we also have many other areas of work in the village. We live and work together here. So all of the people, well, most of the people who work here live here as well. We're about 230 people altogether, of whom about 95 have developmental challenges, and the rest are either long-term volunteers who have decided to life share with people with developmental challenges, or young volunteers who come to life share for a year or 2 or 3 and just have a different experience. So also our workforce at Turtle Tree is a very diverse workforce, both intellectually and also in terms of nation and national origin. Yeah, we have all kinds of wonderful people working here with us. Yeah, so that's just a little background about Turtle Tree. So I'll talk about lettuce production in the Northeast. Obviously, I'm a little bit more south of the Northeast than you guys, but some of the things should hold up pretty well. So the advantages of growing lettuce seed, some of which Adrienne already touched on, which also make it so easy for lettuce seed varieties to be stolen or redistributed. So lettuce is very, very self-pollinating. And so for one thing, it makes it challenging to breed new lettuce varieties because of that. There are methods to do that, but it's not, there's also a certain element of luck involved. And so you can really grow quite a few lettuce varieties yourself on a relatively small amount of land. And that depends obviously on your insect population as well to some extent, but mostly lettuce seed will self-pollinate before the flowers open. And so there's really no risk, or very, very low risk of cross-pollination at even minimal distance. And it's able to flower and produce seed fairly well in our short seasons. Not all lettuces are like that. We've actually been struggling for the last 2 years to get one of our slow bolters to produce seed and it just won't bolt, which is wonderful and really frustrating. And there are also many, many different lettuce varieties to explore. And of course, following Adrienne, I have to say yes, and do be aware as you're exploring the lettuce varieties of whether they have intellectual property rights attached to them. But there are many that don't as well, and yes. And also, you don't need a large space to grow lettuce seed, both in terms of isolation distances between varieties. You can have a relatively small space and be successful, but also because lettuce is self-pollinating and doesn't have the challenges of inbreeding depression that some other crops have, you don't need a huge number of plants to keep a relatively good population growing and a relatively healthy population. Okay, so that's actually, I covered that. So yeah. The challenges include that when lettuce is blooming, it doesn't really like to get water on its flowers. This can lead to botrytis and low seed production. And it's amazing, so we put up lettuce roofs, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can sometimes see if a plant kind of leans out of the roof a little bit and half of the plant has gotten rained on and half of the plant has not gotten rained on because it was under the roof, you can see half of the plant has good seed production and the other half doesn't. It's very, very striking. And of course, we often have wet summers. It's just, we're in the Northeast. And also that lettuce is it very often benefits when you're doing seed production. It benefits from staking, which can be, it isn't another chore to do. So it's something to think of. So this is our method of making lettuce roofs. This is actually on onions, which we also roof to get better production out of them. This is just a tiny little patch, but you can see they're just T-posts, and then we have these sort of metal T's that are, there, that are holding 2 by 2 inch wooden beams. And then above that, we have clear plastic, like Dino glass roofing. And that's very, very durable. We've had it for that particular roofing we've had for over 15 years, and it's going strong. Probably we'll have it for another 15, at least. Although, yeah, so there are the different components. The T-posts, the supports, and then the holders. And we also find, if you can actually switch back to the last slide for a second. The one, yeah. So we also, we hang either sandbags, in this case, it's actually compost bags, but on the roofing, just to hold down the roofing when there's a storm. And it does sometimes blow off. And actually I can see from these pictures that these pictures are not the most ideal, because usually we have wood on the top as well as underneath. And some of them, they sort of skimped on that roofing. So tying the 2 layers of wood around the Dynaglass, and then tying that to something that really firmly can hold it down, like a sandbag, really prevents a lot of the blowing away that often can happen otherwise. Okay, you can carry on. So that was just that was kind of a weird and technical thing to let you guys know, but I find it really, really helpful, just because if you can keep the water off of your seed crops, off of your lettuce seed, it just makes such a difference. It makes a very, very big difference. If you can't, you can also still grow lettuce seed. You just will have a little more challenge, and it also will have quite a bit lower yield. But of course, it's a pretty labor-intensive thing to put it up and remove it. So now I'll move on to lettuce cleaning. It depends really very much on what scale you're doing. Ours, we do a relatively small scale. So we will do I don't know, maybe 50 bed feet of any given variety. And we have also lots of hands, so we're blessed in that way. If it's possible to clip the seed heads from the plants, that's great, and to collect them. And rubber boots, with clean rubber boots, or rubbing with your hands can get a lot of the seed out. We are blessed with a really wonderful thresher that does a great job of doing that. And also has a blower that can start to blow some of the light bits out. But not everyone has one of those. Do you want to carry on? So once the seeds are removed, then it's really useful to do some winnowing. Of course, lettuce seed is attached to these little like kind of dandelion-like parasols. And those can be a little bit of a challenge. So if you can rub the seeds a little bit, that helps. And then just winnowing to get out all the light, airy things. We have an air blower to do that. There are some designs online for make your own air blower things from various seed cleaning places, I think in the UK. And some of those are useful, but some of them are not quite delicate enough to for lettuce seed because it's so small. And there are pretty good instructions, which are, I think, probably easier to do and also more useful for lettuce seed from the OSA, Organic Seed Alliance, to set up box fans and do winnowing that way. Although I find that you really need a lot more like either sheets or tarps or whatever it is underneath the box fan than you will think, because the seed blows a lot farther than you imagine it will. Yeah. Then we also do hand screening to clean. There are screening machines. We find that because we have so many hands, hand screening is just easier, and also it's a little quicker to change things. If you have a screening machine, each time you want to change the size of your screen, it's a whole procedure, whereas a hand screen is just you pick up the next hand screen. And we tend to stack them, the screens. The ones that we use the most for lettuce are 6 by 24, which is sort of a long, narrow hole, and then a 28 by 28, and then a blank, which has a solid bottom. And that's just because, so let's see, I think you can move on to the next screen. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, go back. Thanks. So the lettuce seed will fall through the 6 by 24 screen, but it won't fall through the 28 by 28 unless it's very tiny. And then in that case, it probably won't germinate anyway, so it's not to be worried about. Yeah, so we do the screening, and the screening will screen out quite a bit of plant matter. But of course, there are the sticks that are relatively lettuce seed sized, and those will fall through. And so then we do some different methods to clean those out. If you want to carry on. So we make lettuce boxes. Actually, if you want to go maybe a couple slides so we can see the lettuce boxes. Yeah, there we go. So we have these lettuce boxes. These ones are kind of old and beat up. And they're really just, made out of, cardboard, like poster board. And we have white ones and we have blue ones because, of course, lettuce has some light seeds and some dark seeded varieties. So for dark seeded varieties, we use the white ones. And for light seeded varieties, we use the dark ones so that the seeds show up more easily. And then you can go back to just maybe 2 ago. Yeah, so cleaning in the seed boxes takes a lot of practice to perfect, but even with a relatively, even in the beginning, you can make some good steps towards cleaning, especially getting the sticks out this way. So if you put the lettuce seed in the box and you kind of tilt the box so that the lettuce seed is not going to fall out, and you sort of wiggle it around in a kind of a circular-ish motion, slightly kind of jiggling it while you're doing that. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. Then the sticks will start to congregate towards one side. And as you practice more and become more adept, you can do it very, very well, so that most of the sticks congregate completely at one side, and the other side is very, very clean lettuce seed. I am not that good at it. I still need to do quite a bit of hand cleaning afterwards. So the end of our cleaning process for lettuce seed is actually just hand cleaning, and it's just, you know, sitting there, putting a little bit in your cleaning box, pulling out the bits that are not lettuce seed, and then putting it into your clean seed dish. And because we have so many people who have the ability to really do accurate and detail-oriented work, that's something that is good work for everyone in our shop. Not you know, for long periods of time, but as something to relax and meditate on from time to time. It's very nice. I think that's the whole thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. That was really interesting, and I liked the scale in which you were doing it at. I think folks on this call can appreciate that we have some folks who are growing out lettuce for the seed library at Seeds of Diversity Canada. So they are growing at a small scale, and some of those tips around seed cleaning are really, really helpful. I liked this cardboard box jiggling method. I understood it. I understood what you're talking about. I'm wondering if anyone here has questions or comments for all three of our speakers. I invite other variety trial lettuce folks, if they have any comments or want to add anything, or any of those lettuce seed growers that I mentioned. If you have any questions for Leah around seed cleaning, I also invite you to either drop some questions into the chat, or if you would like, you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question as well. Helen is online to support with translation if you would like to also ask a question in French, and Helen would translate the answer as well into the chat if you need. I was wondering, just to get, I see Kathy has a question. Go ahead.
Instead of writing it out, I just thought it's easier like this way. So we are kind of in between what you're doing at Turtle Tree and what you're doing at Vitalis. So how do we what's the next step up on cleaning lettuce? So we have a thresher. It's an old clipper wood chipper, and that's working beautifully. And then we have a lot of chaff. And we're just wondering, the rubbing, it's been mentioned about rubbing the seed heads together. So we have done that for years as well, to get the seeds out of the heads that are still firm or still intact. But we can't do that anymore by hand. So what's the next step up from, does anyone have other ideas on how to mechanicize that next step in the process?
Can I take that? There are a couple of things. I haven't used the Winnow Wizard, which is being developed, or has been developed by, I'm misremembering his name at the moment, but he works on Frank Morton's farm out in Oregon.
We have one of those, but
you have one of those?
Yes, we do, but it's the step in between. So it's like the threshing is breaking up the sticks. It's splitting some of the heads open, but not all of them. So it's like there's you know, is it the quality of the seed and those heads that haven't opened, we should just forget about it and move on? Or is there another way to, outside of hand rubbing or on a screen, to capture that or crush those so that we get that amount of seed? I mean, Frank Morton talks about it. You shake your bag and all the ripe seed falls into your bag. That's great, but that only works for some of the overripe seeds. So we're doing the 70%. We're harvesting when about 70% of the florets are looking ready, but that still leaves some that are ripening in the bags that I think we could still capture that seed, or is that not a good idea?
I don't know. We have a really good thresher that has like rubber paddles that go around, and that does really breaks open every single seed head. Can
you send us what that is, or?
Well, they don't make them anymore, and I don't think that it was made by like one man and his wife in Austria, and they just, I don't think that they exist except for ours and maybe like a handful of people. I'm sure they aren't going to, part with them.
So is it a barrel? Is that a little barrel shape? Because I was at one of your, at the Stony Hall seeds in the UK, and he had a seed thresher that had been made in Holland.
Yes.
With the barrel, you replace the barrel every time for the size of the seed. So is that something is that what you have?
Yeah, it's a bit similar. Ours also has an air blower that goes through it and various other things. But I think, I mean, if you can find someone mechanically minded who could do something with wooden paddles on screens, that might help. The other really, really useful piece of equipment that you might already know about is a length separator. And I find the ones that are like the discs the most useful for lettuce.
Can you say that again? A length separator?
A length separator. And they have like, they're either a drum or a disc that has little slots in it. And it will pick up anything that's that length, the length of the little slot. But it won't pick up anything that's longer, and so it can separate the lettuce, like the lettuce sticks out from the lettuce seeds very well. But that doesn't really address your problem with the seed heads not opening.
Right. Okay, super, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
I know Bob Wildfang of Seeds to Diversity is on the call. I don't know, Bob, if you have at any point anything to add to some of these seed cleaning questions. I would welcome them. But perhaps this is a question from Ligne. She was asking around bitterness. So Adrienne, you had mentioned that as one of the traits, you were noting, and it's something that Anne and the farmers here in Ontario also noted. And Lynn's just wondering if there's any tips that you would have for growing lettuce that is less bitter.
Well, I can start, and Adrienne might want to, but just as a grower, one thing is to try varieties for your farm and find the ones that will grow without bitterness. Now, it's one of the things we looked at as in our trials. So you might start with looking at some of the ones that we found had better flavor. I mean, there's a couple other things. One, some will. Some, as soon as they start to bolt, they go bitter. I mean, I noticed on one of our green leaf lettuces, and I don't remember which one until I look back, because we were using numbers on them instead of names anyway. But one of them went from one day being great tasting to the next day being, it was almost within a couple, within a day or two being way too bitter. So, if I had if I had picked them that first day when they were just about ready, they would have been good. But getting it to be like full size, it was just like immediately starting to bolt. And so it's partly trying to figure out which ones are least bitter for what kind of lettuce you're looking for. I've also found over the years that just having an eye on, I don't, of course, we're dealing not like in California where you just water when you need it. We're dealing with water sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't, and in hot conditions, sometimes needing a little bit of water when you don't expect, because of course our temperatures aren't consistent either. That's knowing when to give some water to stop them from becoming bitter can be a little bit of an experience of having to learn that too. So that's just a couple of things I've found.
Yeah, yes, I would echo what Anne said. I mean, there definitely are differences by variety. So make sure you're tasting them as you're doing your trials. But absolutely, I don't know the physiology of bitterness. I'd have to Google it. But certainly, you know, when the crop starts to bolt is when you really start to see it. And so I totally agree, you know, making sure your crop is well irrigated, and just generally the less stress that you have in the plants, that stress conditions will lead to more bitterness. So of course that's hardest in the summer when it can be really hot, or you could get, a storm and you get too much rain. So, making sure, but you're keeping it as weed free as possible. A lot of growers that I see are using plastic. So they'll use in the shoulder seasons, they'll use black plastic. And then in the middle of the summer, they use white plastic to try to reduce the heat on the crop. And then also it's more of an issue for, again, if you're recutting for the one cut types or a baby leaf, often those regrowths tend to be more bitter. So that's just something to keep an eye on. Like if you're trying to get regrowth, maybe there's a period in the summer where you're not trying to get a second cut, just because that second cut will tend to be more bitter. But yeah, the happier you can make the lettuce, the better it will taste.
Adrienne, for your variety trials, I'm thinking about how the farmers made up that sheet that you mentioned, the data sheet. And I'm wondering, do you mark down rate bitterness at multiple points when you're doing the trials, or do you do it once? I think we were unsure what we were going to do, so I'm curious what you did.
Right. I mean, I think the choice to have multiple successions is really important, because of course the conditions really vary. And so that is also what I try to do, is have, late spring, early summer trial, a trial that's in the heat of the summer and a trial that's in the fall, and then take my ratings at all those different points. Because I don't focus exclusively on lettuce, I'm not, tasting it every week, but I know some of the trial technicians at some of the seed companies who are, they're in their lettuce field every day throughout the summer, trying to make sure that they're putting the best assortments for growers in their catalog, that they will be doing multiple tastings within a planting. So, I think as with everything, the more data, the more data points you can collect, the more information, but of course you have to balance, at what point do you get the information that you need to make the decision that you feel confident in, and continue to grow the vegetables that you need to sell to make a living, or whatever it is you're doing. So that is, I think, and I think part of that comes with just doing more trials, is getting a sense of, okay, how much do I need to collect and record in order to feel like I'm making an informed decision, and it's not just based on, a preconceived idea, like numbering the varieties like you mentioned, Anne, versus having the names can be helpful, because, you know, a friend or a farmer, you know, that you work with, you know, suggested something, then maybe that sticks in your head, like, oh, this person said they like this variety and not that variety, and that could influence your how you look at it. So, but anyway, you know, yeah, it's a balance, because you know, there gets up to a point where it's too much data, and not it's not worth that much time. So.
Right, that makes sense. And Leah, do you have anything to add sort of on that topic?
No, I'm good. Okay. Just find good varieties that work for you, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing is yes, as Adrienne said, don't discount a lettuce that is bitter in the summer because it may be deliciously sweet in the fall and have good frost resistance. So do try things at different times. It's really crucial.
Right. Good tips.
Could I just say something on the bitterness?
Absolutely, John.
So we grow exclusively for restaurants, and we are aiming to have different chefs come and do some taste testing. Because of COVID, they weren't on site as much, but we did do a few, and they were mostly all right with a bit of bitterness. They just wanted to know ahead of time, and they kind of just, they liked it. They wanted to have a difference, and in the taste testing, two of them enjoyed some that we found a little bit more bitter. Of course, not like really bitter, but the varieties we saw kind of not being as sweet, they actually enjoyed. So it was a little confusing for us when we were all the farmers doing taste tests, always going towards the sweetest, but the chefs were interested in, as long as they knew ahead of time, they can make it work kind of thing if it had a bit of bitterness to it.
That's really interesting. It makes me think that on our data sheets, we shouldn't be rating the flavor as an overall, but maybe breaking it down into, you know, bitterness or some other characteristics that we might differ on, but would be good to know. Thank you for sharing that, John. I had a question for you, Adrienne, around. So we were talking about, you know, some of the protections that are put on lettuce seed, and I'm wondering, just from my understanding, if I'm a smaller seed company, how do I go about providing some of the Vitalis seeds to my growers?
Well, so every company is going to do it differently. Okay. So the way we operate is we have a set list of dealers that we work with, our distributor network. And so, yeah, it's not an issue. We can't just, we're not set up, I would say, logistically to be able to just, if any seed company were to call up and say, hey, can we carry this variety, and we could just send it. But we do have agreements with a couple of our dealers that then they can resell to other companies. And so if a small seed company, and I know there's more and more that are starting, you know, and really focusing on regionally adapted varieties, which I think is wonderful. Yeah, it's just a matter of reaching out to us and telling us what you're interested in, and then we can connect you to someone in our dealer network that can, you know, provide the quantities that are needed. So yeah, it's a little bit of a few steps, but that's how we do it. And like I said, every company is going to have a different model. So.
Right. Oh, that's really great to know, to understand that. We had another question that's a bit more technical on that topic, and maybe it's not something you know, and that's okay too. But PVPs and utility patents are something that you mentioned were regulated by a U.S. You know, government. Do you know how they are upheld in Canada?
Not as well as I should. I guess I probably shouldn't speak off the top of my head because I don't know for sure. I would guess, I would guess that there's some level of reciprocity. That would be my guess. I believe, and it's hard because, right, utility patents are managed differently than PV. I believe with a utility patent, it just because if you were to violate the terms of a utility patent in another country outside of the US, I think you still have to abide by it, I think, but I shouldn't say any more. I'm sorry. I don't know of it.
That's fine.
I can try to do a little bit of digging and find out more about that and get back in touch with you.
That would be amazing, Adrian. We've had a hard time figuring that from this side of the border.
Right.
So that would be really lovely. I don't know, there was a suggestion, and if you had any knowledge of that from your time at NFU and working on policy.
I don't. I've often wondered that question myself, and I've tried. I think I've tried a few times to find out, and I'm not. I should look back and see if I have any notes from a discussion with Stoke Seeds at one point. But yeah, I've often wondered that because I don't think that we have utility patents in Canada. So yeah. So we can't. As far as GMOs, we couldn't patent the plant. We could only patent the gene, and so I think that's a bit different. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't know a definitive answer, and I have wondered that. So
great, thank you. I invite folks to ask questions if they have any. I was wondering if maybe, Leah, you could mention just some of the varieties that do well for you in the area where you are, if you know that. I know I didn't ask that beforehand, but I feel like it would be really interesting for the growers here to learn some of that.
Yeah, so I also grow seeds, so and lettuces, because we probably grow around 10 different lettuce variety seed varieties each year, something like that. And we also do periodic trials. Most recently, we've done summer trials, although we've done spring and fall trials as well. And those tend to be we just trial everything in our catalog, or we either do that, or else we take one of the varieties in our catalog and then find multiple seed sources for that variety and try those next to each other, just to sort of see if we are growing the best iteration of that variety, or what works best for us, I should say, because of course, here we are in our little valley. Some of the things that I particularly love, one of the varieties we carry is green ice lettuce, and that is a spring and fall lettuce that's very crinkly, and it's a leaf lettuce, but it forms a decent heart as well, and it's very crisp and sweet and delicious. I like New Red Fire a lot, which has been in some of your trials. That's something that we carry as well. The first lettuces that we can harvest tend to be our Austrian frilly greenleaf, which is a leaf lettuce. It's sort of an oak leaf lettuce, very, very frilly. And also Krakowiensis, which is a very, very old heirloom lettuce, which bolts incredibly quickly. So it's definitely not anything that you want to grow when there's any warmth, but we can put it out 2 weeks before we typically put out other lettuces. And it sizes up really, really quickly. It also has a kind of a spinachy flavor, which a lot of people like, that's so we've had some people who are not lettuce fans because they say lettuce is boring, doesn't have any flavor, but Crauthoviensis impressed them because it does have quite a bit of flavor in that way. What else do I like? Our red tinged winter lettuce also holds up pretty well in the summer. It's a Batavian type. And it's so that the red tinged winter is one of our most frost resistant, and also winter density is pretty good for that. And Fire Mountain, which is an oak leaf red. Those are all the three that I, when I'm growing for sort of winter hoop house growing, I do those ones, as well as green ice. Oh gosh, I mean, I could talk about our lettuce variety. I don't know.
That was really great. I could see some hands taking notes as you were talking. So that was really great. Thank you.
Yeah, and all of our varieties are not under intellectual property rights, so you can feel free to grow. If you get them, you can feel free to grow your own seed.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention it was really lovely to see your designs for protection for the lettuce seeds. Like Anne, who's a farmer-led researcher, we had a farmer-led researcher in Northern Ontario do a trial of growing lettuce under cover and not under cover up there, and just to statistically see what the difference would be for her. And of course, growing it, she had caterpillar tunnels that the sides were up, so it didn't get too hot in there, so nothing went dormant, and that's how she did it. And just the difference between outside growing and under protection was amazing to see. I've used your method similarly for onions as well, actually, when I was farming. I'm just going to share a screen here, just to give those on the call a way to get in touch with your regional coordinator for the Bauta program. If you have any questions or are curious about some of the trials that we do nationally, or have any questions around seed saving, there's also a lot of training material on the Bauta website, seedssecurity.ca. You can also find some upcoming programs. We have past webinars that are listed that will have eventually this webinar up there as well, since it's being recorded. And we'll also have some webinars coming up in the future. One that is being organized is one on rutabaga, and that's because we have people who are trialing rutabaga all across Canada right now. And so I'm excited to listen to that as well. I wanted to also point out just a few little, not so little, events that are coming up. Steph, who's been helping me with tech on this webinar, has organized a mini conference that's happening the 16th and 17th of November. And you can go to acornorganic.org/events for more of that. And the EFAO, Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario conference is happening at the beginning of December. There's some great programming during that week. We have more can be heard about the results of the variety trials that Anne was mentioning on the Monday, and there will be farming and seed related events throughout the week. And something that I've had the pleasure of working with Adrienne on is the Northeast Organic Seed Conference, which happens in collaboration with NOFA New York, and that happens in the new year, January 16th to 23rd, and that will have some really amazing seed-specific training events. And so maybe some questions around where does your seed come from, but also I've bred a new variety, now what? These sorts of questions you may be able to learn at this seed conference. So I'd like to thank Leah, Babitch, Adrian Shelton, and Slater, again, so much for being on this webinar. Thank you, all of you who have joined and asked questions and participated in the event. I welcome you all to reach out if you have questions coming in afterwards as you think about what you may have learned. I'm grateful for you all. So thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks.
Thank you.